Hey everyone, we are continuing chapter 14. We are on slide 27. We just went over a lot of different sensory receptors, different sensory neurons, which we will recap. We're continuing on to a different category, different functional category, and a different structural category of neurons. Sensory neurons were either pseudo-unipolar, if it was somatosensory or visceral sensory, or bipolar shaped, if it was a special sense, like vision, taste, temperature, vision, taste, smell, stuff like that. When we talk about the neurons that are found exclusively in the brain or spinal cord, those neurons are called interneurons. An interneuron is found entirely within the central nervous system. And remember, our definition of central nervous system is brain and the spinal cord. We saw previously that sensory neurons have their dendrites, axons, cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system, but the axon terminals ended in the central nervous system, so they're split between the systems. Interneurons are entirely within the central nervous system. So that's one important fact to know. These interneurons are going to be receiving information from lots of places. And to do that, they need lots of dendrites. So the term for the shape of these neurons is multipolar. Multipolar because there are many dendrites. And to signify that, without overdoing it, I've just drawn 3 dendrites here, 1, 2, 3, directly surrounding the cell body. The dendrites are directly attached to the cell body. That's in stark contrast to pseudo-unipolar, where the dendrites were far away from the cell body, or bipolar, where still the dendrites kind of extended out from the cell body. So multipolar neurons, highly branched dendrites, usually one really long axon that extends to somewhere else in the brain or spinal cord. And by having lots of dendrites, they're getting lots of input from the sensory neurons. If you are a president or a CEO, if you're the leader of some organization, you have lots of aides, lots of people who you can hear, get information from. But ultimately, it's you who makes the decision. They tell you, here's what's going on. They're informing you, just like our sensory neurons inform our brain and spinal cord. Here's what's going on with our body. Here's what's going on in the outside world. Your brain and spinal cord take that information and decide what to do. Your interneurons take that information and decide what to do. This is the decision making. This is the integration. So I've drawn one of these multipolar neurons, multipolar interneurons here, found directly within the central nervous system. We have a sensory neuron leading into it, and eventually we'll see that it's going to send output via a motor efferent neuron. Interneurons are always multipolar. So with sensory neurons, it could have been pseudo-unipolar or bipolar. Interneurons are always multipolar. Take a look at our picture here. See this neuron that I'm pointing at? Dendrites and cell body. This is multipolar. It's an interneuron because it starts in the brain and ends in the spinal cord. Starts in the brain, ends in the spinal cord. This is a multipolar interneuron. Interneurons can communicate with other interneurons, so it just might be a relay between interneurons, but they eventually might communicate with a motor efferent neuron, efferent with an E. Efferent with an E. Afferent with an A was sensory, because you're approaching the central nervous system. Efferent with an E, you're exiting the central nervous system. You're sending signals from the central nervous system, and you're ending at either a muscle or a gland, some kind of effector, the general term for something that you control, whether it's your muscles, your heart, your blood vessels, your glands. Those are generally termed as effectors. Hence, efferent pathways control effectors. The term for the group of axons, those are efferent fibers with an E. Sensory axons are afferent with an A. Motor efferent ones are with an E. If you take a look at the dendrites in the cell body of motor neurons, they're found in the central nervous system. Dendrites in cell body of motor neurons are found in the central nervous system, in the brain or spinal cord. But the axon extends out and targets whatever the effector is. So the axon and axon terminal are in the peripheral nervous system. When we say motor efferent, what does that mean? Again, you're controlling muscles, glands. There's a lot of different things we can control in our body. So shown here is a rough organization of how of the different things we can control. And so let me break this down for you piece by piece. If you want to control your skeletal muscles, you are going to control, let me draw a neuron here, multipolar, so I'm going to draw 3 dendrites just to show that there's a lot. Axon extends out, and we're controlling skeletal muscle. This is called the somatic motor nervous system. And so this would be called a somatic motor neuron. These are the ones that we saw controlling our skeletal muscle back in chapter 7, 6, one of those earlier chapters. I want to say 7. Yeah, somatic motor neurons control skeletal muscle, not smooth, not cardiac. We'll get to those in a minute. Somatic motor neurons control skeletal muscle. What characterizes them is that there's conscious control through these neurons, except for, you know, when you don't have to think about breathing or those reflexes that we discussed that we'll take a look at in a minute. And I'll say that these neurons are myelinated so that you have quick conduction to control your skeletal muscles. Somatic motor nervous system controlling physical movement of your skeleton, control your skeletal muscles. The autonomic nervous system is the other branch of your efferent nervous system. Autonomic, as the name implies, means it's automatic. You don't have to think about controlling this. If we had to think about this all the time, it would be very tiring. Thinking about when to digest, when to change the size of your blood vessels, when your heart should beat faster, when to salivate. You don't want to think about that all day. You want it to be automatic. So there's some subconscious control of your organs and glands. The term for this automatic response is an autonomic reflex. Our autonomic nervous system can be divided into 2 branches. So there's even more division here. We can divide our autonomic neurons into 2 branches. There's the sympathetic nervous system. Sympa means together. Like sympathy, you share sympathy, you're sharing in someone's plight, someone's sorrow. Sympathetic nervous system is that you have this response throughout your body that's coordinated. All these responses are coordinated, but that's where the name came from. These are very quick responses to stressful events. During a stressful event, usually people either are ready to fight, if it is something that requires fighting, whether physically or verbally. If you might want to run away, again, literally from a fight, you don't want to get involved in a dangerous thing, or even if it's just something uncomfortable, like confrontation can be uncomfortable, you just feel like you want to run away, or you freeze. You just kind of stay in place and you're not really sure what to do. All of these are completely normal responses in response to something very stressful. I'm sure you've all had this, hopefully nothing too life-threatening, but I'm sure you've been uncomfortable in your life, like for a test or asking someone out, whatever. That's your sympathetic response. And that comes with things like increased heart rate, increased breathing rate, What you're not focusing on is digestion. If you want to focus on digestion, you want to calm down. You don't want to have your heart rate up. You don't want to be running and eating. That's no fun. That's your sympathetic response. Your parasympathetic response. Parasympathetic. Para means to the side, and we'll see when we get to this chapter, we'll see how it's literally off to the side. But the parasympathetic nervous system is the complementary branch. If sympathetic is getting ready for a really stressful response, parasympathetic is letting you relax and focus on digestion. So the acronym here, or not the acronym, the mnemonic is that it's for resting and digesting. When I say rest, I mean for skeletal muscle. So with digestion, that means you have increased digestion. So your body is working. You're just diverting energy into digesting rather than using your skeletal muscles. And so using skeletal muscles uses way more energy than digestion. So as a whole, your body's heart rate, body's breathing rate, and other things have decreased. We'll talk about other things that are controlled by these systems later. Sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. These are also multipolar in terms of shape, multipolar neurons, which start in the central nervous system and then extend out of the central nervous system. Start in the central nervous system, so cell body dendrites start in the central nervous system, axon, axon terminal, extend out. So here is a summary of what we've discussed so far, that you have an input in terms of in the peripheral nervous system, where you have sensory receptors that send information along afferent pathways, afferent with an A, into the central nervous system meaning brain or spinal cord. In the brain and spinal cord, you're integrating, you're deciding what to do with that information. Do you do something or do you do nothing? Doing nothing is a response. From there, you send output through efferent neurons. Efferent can be autonomic, if you want to control things like your heart, blood vessels, glands, organs, or it can be somatic motor, if you want to control skeletal muscle. And you'll get some kind of response if you do that. In the final video, next one, we will take a look at how nerves, these axons that are in the peripheral nervous system, how nerves are organized, and how a recap of how all of this can be controlled in a reflex pathway. So I'll see you in the next video. Please let me know if you need clarifications or if you have any questions. Thanks.